Okay, tell me about toxins and why they're important.
Toxins are all around us. They affect us. They're in our food, they're in our what we drink, they're in the bottles that we have for water, that we use for water. They're on our clothes. We use laundry detergents, which are chemicals. We dry clean, which uses trichloroethylene. All these things are constantly around us. Then there's gasoline fumes and diesel fumes from the environment, and all of these things affect us. Let me give you, for instance, say pork, ham, bacon, salami, pork chops, etc. In this country, all pork is given ractopamine, which is an alpha agonist, before they're sacrificed, about a week before they're sacrificed. Why? Because that helps turn fat into meat. So it's actually banned almost everywhere else in the world, but we still use it. So you're getting, when you're eating anything made with pork, or if you're having a pork chop, you're getting a chemical in that. Same thing happens with chicken. Commercial chicken feed contains arsenic. These are hundreds of thousands of chickens, and they all need to be fed, so you buy commercial chicken feed. It contains arsenic. Arsenic swells the stomach of the chicken up, and the chicken eats more to fill the empty space, and then we sell it. It's being sold by weight, so it's a way to make more money. Commercial dairy cows, Jersey cows, they're given a female hormone, bovine hormone, so they produce between 15 and 17% more milk. Well, that in itself is a female hormone. Do little boys and little girls need an extra female hormone in their food when they're having a glass of milk, or they're having cereal with milk, or putting milk on their oatmeal? And then think about it. Beef, all cattle, again, these CAFOs, these huge animal feed operations, corporate animal feed operations, have thousands and thousands of heads of cattle. Then they inject them with a female hormone known as DES, diethylstilbestrol. And this is another female hormone. So when that person or child goes to have a Happy Meal and gets a burger with female hormones, and then cheese with a female hormone, what is happening to youth? Now, little girls are developing into having periods, and developing into women at age 9 and 10, which used to be 12 to 14 back before, and little boys eventually develop into men who cannot function properly in having children because they have all this female hormone load. Just one example. Then let's say the plastic bottles. We drink water from all these billions and billions of plastic bottles. Well, that contains a substance, bisphenol A, known as BPA, that is a hormone disruptor. It as well disrupts. It has such a bad effect on hormones that the FDA banned that substance, BPA, from being used in anything for babies. In other words, from the baby bottle nipples and things like that, they can't use it for that. So we know that now the manufacturers are changing from BPA to a different type of bisphenol, thinking they can put on the label, this does not have bisphenol A, BPA, no BPA in this bottle, but it has another BPE. So do you think it made any bit of difference to the hormones? No, of course not. Look at our foods. We use, and now it's gotten kind of famous. I wrote an article years ago about glyphosate. We use so much glyphosate on our crops, more than any other country in the world, okay? More than all of Europe combined. And it's an agent that we now know, as of this year, that it causes cancer. So here we are in our crops, 49 to 50 different kind of crops, anything from wheat, corn, soy, all the way to beets and papaya, etc., all have this residue of glyphosate that we're eating and using in our cooking and feeding children, and everybody eats that. So this is one of the causes for all this increase in celiac disease, thyroid problems, in deaths from intestinal infections, from all this glyphosate in our food that we consume. The other thing is that on foods, especially crops, and this is, it doesn't matter whether they've been sprayed or not, we know that about 20 to 25%, 28% of our food contains mycotoxins because it grows in nature. And mycotoxins are not good for us, but fortunately we consume only parts per billion, which we secrete out. We get rid of it through the urine. So with all the pesticides, glyphosate, and then we add to this mixture genetically modified food. Now, it takes us about 15 generations to change and adapt to something. Instead, we've had 2-3 generations to adapt to something that is genetically modified. And you know what? Where they get the gene, they get it from either bacteria or a virus. And it's so that when you cut an apple into pieces, and you don't eat it all right away, so it just doesn't turn brown anymore on the cut sides, so it stays the same color as it was. Does that really make a difference? Or same with potatoes, for example. So that's what genetically modified does. Our wheat has been genetically modified, so this is what's causing all our problems in our gut. We have huge amounts, this country spends huge amounts on health to begin with, but we get sick because of what we drink and what we eat and the containers and what we put on our foods before we get either sacrifice the animals or when we go out and get the wheat and the corn in. So all these toxins are around us and in us, and we continue to be befuddled by them every day. It's no longer, you'd have to go very far away to find an area that doesn't have toxins.
Do you think this, I think people are getting sicker younger and younger. How do you think the toxins contribute to this?
Before we used to die of infections. We don't anymore. Now what we have to do is we have to deal with chronic conditions. Everybody's having a disease controlled. We no longer cure. So we have our blood sugar controlled, our cholesterol controlled, all these diseases, arthritis controlled. But why do we have these diseases to begin with? Why is there a pandemic of diabetes? Because of what's happening from our foods. I will tell you that there's an incredibly good book written by Dr. Ari Vajdani about foods causing immune disorders. And if your doctor should read that. Any doctor in the United States, any clinician that sees patients, because not all of us are MDs, some of us are naturopaths, some of us are chiropractors. Everyone should read this book to see what foods do to our health and how they destroy our health and cause autoimmunity in us. So in that sense, we can avoid a lot of things, but we don't, and that's why we have all these chronic conditions, and they're getting younger and younger. In Japan, they're doing gastric bypass in 10-year-olds because of how obese they are. So there you have it, chronic diseases, and you're getting them at earlier and earlier and earlier age.
And how do the foods cause autoimmune disease?
They cause antibodies to form against this foreign substance that's comes into our body, your immune system has to deal with the foreign substance. It doesn't ignore it. It has to deal with it, and then it becomes an antibody, and this produces what we call an adduct, a binding, something that binds, and it binds to human tissue, and that binding to human tissue causes, as a trigger, it's a trigger to autoimmunity. It opens the door to developing autoimmunity. What am I talking about? Adult onset diabetes mellitus, issues with multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, etc. There's over 100 autoimmune diseases, and the prevalence is increasing every year. It has nothing to do with how they increased in population. It's prevalence. In other words, more and more people are getting diagnosed with an autoimmune disease because of this.
No.
What happens is the immune system reacts, binds these foreign substances, these things that shouldn't be in our body, binds their protein, and then from there triggers an autoimmune reaction because it binds to human tissue.
And aren't these toxins synergistic? So, because the government will say a little bit of this won't hurt you, a little bit of that won't hurt you. Don't they all have different mechanisms and therefore can be synergistic?
Okay, a very good question that can be asked by everybody. Well, what happens if I get this toxin plus this other one plus this other one? So I ate chicken, then I had pork, then I had beef, and then I drank water out of a plastic bottle, and then I had some ice cream made with this hormone from they were given to cows, etc. Are these synergistic? Do they make each other worse? Or do they kind of, it's a multiple? We don't know. Nobody has studied that. They have studied each toxin by itself. But no one has studied, well, what happens if I have this toxin and add this other one to it? Is it additional or is it a multiple? We don't know that yet.
Some people say that signs that you've had something toxic, I mean, some people say your pulse goes up right away. Some people say you pee and not much comes out. Some people say that you don't feel well, might have brain fog. What is a signal that, oh, this might have been toxic to us?
So what happens is that everybody's immune system is unique and different. So you can put 10 people in the same room, same age, same height, same weight, and expose them to something, and they're going to get 10 different reactions. Some people are going to be very sick from it, and others are going to be totally healthy because they got rid of it. So everybody's immune system being different means you're going to, some people, yes, are going to have no issues whatsoever, or they're going to get it much later than sooner than some other individuals, etc. So there's no real way to be able to say everybody's going to have a reaction, the same reaction. No. Some will have a delayed reaction, some will have an immediate reaction, others will have a moderate reaction, etc. They will all react. They will all have their immune system react to something foreign. That is a known factor. But how they react will be different for each person.
What do toxins do to our health?
I'm sorry?
What do toxins do to our health, or how do they do it? I mean,
how do toxins affect our health? Well, first, they're not supposed to be there. Okay? Think of how your great-grandparents lived. Okay? What did they eat and drink, and what did they do all day? First of all, they were out in the sun a lot more because they didn't sit in cars. There were no cars. So either they walked or rode on a horseback or whatever, which means they got a lot of sun during the day, unless it was real deep winter, and they had enough vitamin D made because they were out so much. Second of all, they were grounded, meaning they didn't live on second and third and 10th floors, etc. They had sandals and walked on the ground. They slept and sat on the ground, so they were grounded, just like the wire in your house has a ground to it. We need grounding. There's been studies that have showed that if people will ground themselves for half an hour to 45 minutes, their blood pressure comes down if they have hypertension. So the other part is what did they eat? They ate what came off the fields that week or the week before. They went to the marketplace on Saturday and bought what was just came off the fields or the trees or whatever. They didn't eat fruit out of season or vegetables out of season. Meat was a rarity. Meat was eaten during certain celebrations a few times a year. That was it. So the rest of the time they ate everything fresh. There was no refrigeration. So everything was fresh. It was not wrapped in plastic or something. It was all right there. No one ate strawberries in December. So all of these things, because they go so far back to Adam and Eve till now, and here we are now, and we don't have that. We eat whatever we want, and we get cans, and the cans, excuse me, let me bring this in, the cans are aluminum. Aluminum is terrible for the brains. You want to get away from aluminum because that's one of the problems with Alzheimer. Secondly, the inside lining of cans is made with this BPA, bisphenol A, to keep the whatever's in the can from leaching into the side of the can. That's why you can open a can and pour it right out. It comes right out. It doesn't stick to the side of the can. So that's canned for you. If you're going to have something, it's better to get it frozen than get it canned. That's a given.
Even if it's in a plastic bag?
Well, plastic is becoming such a problem that it's killing whales and animals, etc. I mean, they're filled with plastic because we make it and we don't get rid of it. We just keep making more, and they're toxic to us. So we filled our world with these containers. I remember way back when, better living through chemistry, and plastics help us. Well, they did for a while, but now we produce so much of it that find me a store that doesn't have something wrapped in plastic. It doesn't even have to be a supermarket. Everything has plastic because it's cheap.
What are the terrible things they do to our food that will really shock people?
Well, first of all, I think putting arsenic in our food and hormones in beef and cattle and pork and hogs, etc., is pretty bad. And then spraying glyphosate on all our crops is pretty bad. I don't know what could be more shocking than eating all these chemicals every time you sit down at a meal, whether it be in a restaurant or not. Not everybody can go out and find organic food in this country. You go to France, for example, you go to big supermarkets. Supermarkets are pretty much alike in all countries. The section in our supermarkets, which is for eggs, is not a big section. That is the section in France for processed foods. The rest of the store is all organic. So can you imagine that? You get bread. First of all, it's wrapped in plastic. Go down that aisle. It's a whole aisle of breads. Okay? All wrapped in plastic. Secondly, they all contain sugar. Have you ever read the label? There's sugar in all the bread. Now, do you think that's how your great grandfather, mother, etc., descendants ate? Something wrapped in plastic with sugar in it? No. Don't forget, we didn't have sugar until about 400 years ago.
What about the chemicals that people put on their bodies?
Oh my gosh. Well, one thing is, everywhere you go, there's these bottles that you squeeze and put something on your hand and, oh, I now have clean hands. Let me tell you what cleans hands. Water. Not some man-made chemical which is now being found at birth in cord blood of women. Okay? That's how ubiquitous this chemical has become. Then we use underarm deodorant, which contains aluminum. Another no-no. You have a gazillion sweat glands under each arm, and you're putting aluminum so they go up the sweat glands, get into your bloodstream, and go to your brain. The other part is makeup. Makeup for women has hundreds and hundreds of chemicals that are toxic, and they're being used every day by young women, older ladies, everyone, and they're all toxic. Shampoos and conditioners, you can't pronounce the names of the chemicals that are in your shampoo and conditioner. It's nothing but a bunch of chemicals. Do you think your great-grandmother used nice smelling shampoos in different colors? Never. Didn't exist. Soap existed, probably made by them. So our whole world, our whole environment is full of chemicals. It has all changed.
And do you think this is contributing to, people getting sicker sooner?
People are getting sick because their immune system can't defend against so many different attacks every day, all day long, from morning till night, all the stuff that we're exposed to. Our immune system is getting exhausted. There's now more than 100 autoimmune diseases. As I said earlier, the prevalence is increasing tremendously all over the world. This is not only here, it's all over the world. So with that, all these things that are toxic to us are affecting us. And I haven't even mentioned here toxins from the molds in moldy homes and trailers and buildings and workplaces, etc. That's another subject. But just in what I've mentioned up to now, it's affecting every part of us. And doctors, most doctors trained recently are taught to prescribe a drug. They don't have the time because of our healthcare system being broken, and everybody knows this. It's nothing new with it being controlled by insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, and hospitals. They don't have the luxury of time to sit down and spend an hour with a patient. My new patients spend an hour and a half to 2 hours with me. They don't have that luxury. They have 15, 20 minutes most. And they have to, in that 15, 20 minutes, do a complete medical history, a complete occupational history, a family history, a full examination, differential diagnosis, and then order the appropriate lab test. There is no way that can be done in that short period of time.
So how do mycotoxins get in our food?
The U.S. Department of Agriculture, and as well as the UN, etc., all these organizations know that about 25% of our foods contain mycotoxins just because they grow outdoors, and mold gets on them and they produce mycotoxins. Fortunately, our immune system, it's so small an amount, it's tiny, it's parts per billion. And I asked a scientist once, what's a part per billion? Give me an example. I want to be able to understand a part per billion. He says, look, cover 10 football fields with golf balls. Got that? I said, yes. He says, now remove one golf ball. That's 1 part per billion. Oh, okay. That I can conceive easier. So our bodies can get rid of that small amount. We usually do it through our urine. However, unfortunately, there's laboratories that say, no, we measure your urine for mycotoxins and they make you sick. They don't. First of all, they only can measure in urine the metabolites of mycotoxins, not actual mycotoxins. So they're kind of not saying it like it should be said. So it's okay to pee out. That's a good thing that you're peeing out mycotoxins every day. That's good. You're getting rid of stuff. So that's that part. So if you think you're getting exposed by molds and mycotoxins, you should get a blood test for mycotoxin antibodies, because that tells you what the body burden is, not what you're excreting that day, that afternoon, or that morning that you peed out into that container.
Okay. Do you think that our government's been co-opted by corporations?
I think that elected officials only are looking at the next time that their next re-election. They don't look at the long-term picture, what's good for the best for the country and the public over a long period of time. Second of all, these big companies have huge amounts of money that they invest in influencing the government to side with them, to accept their method, to convince government officials, elected government officials, of what they're doing. Okay, and they do this through all kinds of mediums and media in Washington, etc. So, and of course, if you come to a normal human being that's been elected into office at whatever level, and you show them these wonderful charts, etc., and no one shows them anything else, they're going to believe it. Now, I think that it's been a kind of an issue whereby they think big corporations do everything they can to influence that laws are passed for their benefit. Not for the benefit of people, because what do corporations do? They want us to have happy investors. That's their goal. Their goal is not to provide a good service, to be a good, responsible social company. No, it's to show increased profits that make investors happy. That's their business. That's how it is. It's not neither good nor bad. It's how it is. Okay? So I don't think that the consumer, the average person, has really a chance to work against a multi-billion dollar corporation that spends many millions of dollars for lobbyists and all kinds of things to convince elected officials that, you know, what we're doing is the best for everybody.
Do our clothes have toxins in them?
Yes, our clothes have toxins in them. Fire retardants, for example. If you fly on an airplane, the entire interior has a load of fire retardants. But what about the home? You're talking about carpeting, curtains, pajamas for children. All these have a chemical that is a fire retardant soaked into them to, again, retard any fire. If you get in a car and it's a new car and that new car smell, you're smelling fire retardants. So, yes, do our clothes contain toxins? Of course. Then, as I said earlier, you wash them in commercial detergents, which contain, read the label, all kinds of chemicals. Or, if you have some of your clothes dry cleaned, that trichloroethylene. So when you pick up your clothes and the plastic covers over them, etc., put them in the trunk of your car, not with you inside the car. Second, when you get home, hang them in the garage or somewhere outdoors or somewhere else for a couple of days, and then put them in your closet. How many people actually do that?
Are there any other toxins in clothes other than flame retardants?
Well, it depends on the type of clothes, where they come from, what country they're made in other words, and what is the level of, say, hygiene in that company. Because, for example, you use coloring. Colors give, red, blue, green, black, white, etc. You've got to color this substance which the clothes are made of. Well, how do those companies actually do that? Do they dip them into huge color vats which are actually chemicals that give the color? Okay? Just like tattoos. So these are chemicals. Now how do they, once the color is in the cloth or whatever it is, cotton, nylon, what about them? Then you have things that are man-made clothes. Is nylon a natural substance or is it a man-made substance? It's a man-made substance. So it's made from the petrochemical industry, and then you color it, and then you wear it next to the largest organ of your body, your skin, which has gazillions and gazillions of sweat glands and pores that these things go through. So, do clothes have things on them that you really don't want? Of course.
Any final words on toxins? I mean, I'm hoping just to hear some things that really shock people and go, wait a minute, something's wrong here, I've got to be more careful.
Yes. It's very hard to get away from these toxins, but the best thing that you can do for your body is, one, exercise daily, 30 to 40 minutes. I don't mean you have to go join a gym. A nice, brisk, fast walk, like you're walking to an appointment and you're late. That is a good thing. Secondly, I would say drink lots of water. Not colored of anything. Don't buy Gatorade blue, green, yellow, orange, red, whatever. No, those are all artificial. Just plain water. Drink. You should drink much more water than you're actually drinking.
Okay.
And third, as much as possible, cook fresh and organic. And what I recommend to my patients is they take a few hours and cook several meals and then freeze them, because otherwise they come home, they're tired, they just want to throw something in a microwave. And I understand that they're tired. They've worked all day. They don't feel like taking something out, washing it, chopping it, etc., etc. So take some time, do several meals at one time, and then save them in the freezer, so that all you got to do is reheat it when you come home.
What do mycotoxins from food do to the body?
Well, mycotoxins in food are such in such small amounts that you literally get rid of them in your urine. If they start accumulating, it's usually because you're living in an environment that's been water damaged. Wherever there's water damage, there are molds, and wherever there are molds, they're going to have mycotoxins. And just so that the public and everybody understands, even doctors, one mold produces a series of mycotoxins. It's not one and one. And whenever there's mold damage, there's not one mold living there. There's several producing spores, etc., and mycotoxins. So the molds are inflammatory, but the mycotoxins are toxic. They're really bad for you. We used mycotoxins in Cambodia. Saddam Hussein used it in his war against the Iranians. That's how bad mycotoxins are. When people go in for a kidney or transplant or some other transplant, we give them a medication called cyclosporine to suppress their immune system, which is a derivative of mycotoxins, because that's what mycotoxins do. They suppress the immune system, so you get sick and remain sick.
How do you get rid of mycotoxins in the home? Would chloride bleach do it, or
No.
what chemicals? And are the chemicals toxic?
The best way to get rid, first of all, the first rule of toxicology is get the patient away from the toxin, or the toxin away from the patient. So that's the first rule. As long as the person is exposed to whatever toxin, they cannot get better, regardless of how they're treated or how many medications or vitamins or supplements they take. They will not get better. So remove them from the source of the where the toxin is, so that then you can start healing. And what you do is you help the immune system with what I mentioned, earlier is organic foods, lots of water. You won't be able to walk in the beginning, 30, 40 minutes at a brisk pace, because one of the problems with mycotoxins, they cause a tremendous amount of fatigue. But slowly your body will start healing. I usually give my patients Sporanox twice a day, and that gets rid of the spores that are there with the mycotoxins, and then your body starts to heal. Usually it's at least 6 months before the body, you start feeling a little bit more like yourself, a little better, a little more normal. The other parts that mycotoxins really affect besides the immune system is the brain. So they climb up the olfactory nerve on the cribriform plate and into the brain.
Now, I've got water damage from the persons above whose shower just came, water just came right into my bathroom, so I can see the mold there. I mean, I don't really feel like, not living there. What do I do to get rid of it or minimize it?
First, you've got to find a reputable, and I underline with 3 red lines and put a big black square on the word reputable, mold remediator. Because that person should be really knowledgeable of how to remove mold. Now, I have no ties, commercial or otherwise, to this company, but there's one product that's called TM100. T as in Tom, M as in Mama, 100. And it's made by a company, I think it's in Texas, I'm not sure, but that's the only OSHA approved substance that gets rid of molds and mycotoxins. Yes, there's a lot of toxins all around us all the time, and it's becoming more and more of a problem. Find a good doctor. A doctor who will spend the time with you, who will listen carefully and think of you, not and never look at his watch.